Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
For a 3-week-long sort of adventure, maybe just an experiment, seeing if they could do it. For 3 weeks, covering most of this month, the Republican-led state government in the great state of Missouri decided that they would start forcing the last abortion provider in that state, a Planned Parenthood clinic in St. Louis, to subject every woman seeking an abortion at that facility to a mandatory, medically unnecessary internal pelvic examination. We have been covering this story here on the show ever since it first broke. When the last Planned Parenthood clinic in Missouri went to renew their license this year, the state government told them that in order to do so, they would have to start doing this extra pelvic exam, an extra internal vaginal examination, at least 3 days before a woman could actually get her abortion from the same clinic. This is the first time the state had ever asked the clinic to do such a thing to their patients. It was based, they said, on a new interpretation of existing state law. So it wasn't a new legal requirement. There wasn't the legislature passing this and signing it into law. This was just the state health department looking at the existing law and deciding that from here on out, clinic, you're going to have to start doing these extra ones. In order to keep the clinic open, these doctors at Planned Parenthood in St. Louis, they agreed to it. They felt they had no choice. The state made it a condition of their keeping their license and keeping their doors open. And so for 3 weeks, the doctors at that clinic were forced to give women an internal vaginal probe for no medical reason, as basically the cost of getting an abortion in Missouri. But once the state government in Missouri started forcing them to do that, they could not force the doctors to stay quiet about it at the same time.
We're not satisfied with the fact that we do the pelvic exam when it's medically necessary. They want us to do the pelvic exam 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days before they even get the procedure. They want us to do pelvic exams on medication abortions. None of that is medically necessary.
The idea that we've been having to put women through something that's totally unnecessary, uncomfortable, inhumane, just because the state has reinterpreted the rules just doesn't seem fair.
We either have to ask patients to subject themselves to a state-sanctioned, essentially sexual assault, or they can't have an abortion here in Missouri.
Since we first started covering this story, it's been interesting to see the outcry over this policy, this anger over what the state was making these doctors do to their patients. Anger, expression of outrage and objection coming from not just the doctors having to perform these procedures, but from the patients themselves, from medical professionals across the country. But then eventually it broke. After 21 days of being forced by the state to subject their patients to what these doctors considered to be a state-sanctioned, state-mandated sexual assault, the physicians at that clinic finally decided, we're not going to do this anymore. They said, we've done this for 3 weeks. We are no longer going to give our patients a medically unnecessary vaginal exam 3 days before their abortion. We are no longer doing this. We had the medical director of the clinic here on the show that night to explain how he and his colleagues came to that decision and what they thought the state might do in response. Well, that was Wednesday of last week. The doctors standing up to the state government saying, we're done. We know you're making our license contingent on this as a clinic and you want to shut us down, but we are not going to make our patients go through this unnecessary, uncomfortable, inhumane thing just because you say so. How will the state respond? Nobody knew. On Friday, something unexpected happened, which is that the state basically said, well, okay then. They basically said, all right. On Friday, the Republican-led state health department in Missouri took back its new rule that all women in Missouri must get a second unnecessary pelvic exam before they're allowed to have an abortion 3 days in advance. They reversed course. They changed their mind. The health director in Missouri is a man named Randall Williams. He himself is a doctor. He is actually an OBGYN. Oh, he is the one who decided that women had to get this second pelvic exam in the first place. On Friday, he talked to reporters about why he changed his mind. He said, quote, in looking at what they're doing and the fact that they think it causes a burden for patients to do the pelvic exam twice, as a clinician who practiced for 30 years, I'm sensitive to that. He is sensitive to that. It took State Health Director Randall Williams more than 3 weeks to develop a sensitivity to that, to doctors practically shouting themselves hoarse about how his new vaginal probe mandate might be hurting their patients. But after 3 weeks of medically unnecessary pelvic exams and lots of publicity about them, Randall Williams in the health department, they did come around. He decided to tap into his 30 years as a trained medical professional and listen to those doctors at the clinic. Planned Parenthood says because of that pelvic exam rule, because it took the state 3 weeks to change their mind about it, more than 100 women were forced through that. More than 100 women forced by the state to have an internal exam they didn't need. More than 100 women had to take off their clothes, let a doctor insert an instrument inside their body because of a policy the state now reversed. They've now taken it back. More than 100 women forced to undergo those vaginal exams because of what the state now admits was kind of an oops moment. We're sensitive to it now. Planned Parenthood is calling for the state health director of Missouri, Randall Williams, to be fired over what happened to those 100+ women on his orders, which he now says was a mistake. But the state says, broadly pictured, it's all over now. If you are a woman trying to get an abortion in Missouri today, you don't need to get a second medically unnecessary pelvic exam anymore before you're allowed to have your abortion. The state says they're cool with just the one now. That said, the state is still trying to end all access to legal abortion in Missouri.
It is Wednesday, the 26th of June of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid me of this priest? Speaking of Jerry Falwell Jr., well, that's only a very, 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 very small tidbit of news in the much larger macro world that we all must live in. But, Jerry Falwell's out there criticizing people for never building anything from scratch. Of course, he did inherit his wealth from a tent revivalist huckster. Yeah, Flim Flam Man, a rainmaker. Oh my, Jerry, I think you ought to just, shut your mouth. We don't want to hear about the pool boy anymore. I don't even want to think about you at a nudie beach. I just don't. Now let's talk about Mueller. Now that's the big macro news in the world that we must live in. And apparently he has been compelled to testify by subpoena. In July. Well, that's plenty of time to, everything could change. I keep telling everybody, I know that they made Mueller an offer that he couldn't refuse. And I'm just curious how many horses' heads they put on Mueller's wife's bed. Because I don't think it would necessarily compel Mueller if they put a horse head on his bed. But his wife's? I have a feeling that maybe that might compel Robert Mueller to maybe do what he's been doing. Playing low. Staying quiet. keep your head down. That's what they teach you in the Marines. Keep your head down. Your butt, too. Don't put your head down and then stick your butt up in the air. So he learned that lesson well, and when it comes to self-preservation, no one wants to have something convenient happening to them in today's new go-go world. Of course not. Everybody knows what can happen now. I mean, my gosh. What is Trump's Secret Service code name? Man from Vlad? I think it's Man from Vlad. So, we got that going for us, which is nice. Fox and Friends doesn't think that Mueller knows any of the details in the report that Mueller authored. And the people who watch Fox are going to believe that, too. Because, I got to tell you, if they happen to have actual political intelligence and acumen, the grievance is all a part of it as well. So they don't care whether it's the truth or not. They being, the viewers of Fox, especially the ones who are part of the Trump cult. I don't know what else you could call it. So the grievance is always much more important than even the knowledge. Where they may have acquired knowledge and intelligence, grievance will make up for it and bring it right on back down into the mire and the muck. Yikes. Looks like the DOJ just asked the Supreme Court to essentially become a branch of the Trump administration. We're going to have to look into that and get into that before the end of the week. We're still in a trade war with China as Iran tensions dominate the G20. Attack our allies. Have love letters with our enemies. I don't know. It's a topsy-turvy world. That's how it is in the upper echelons of wealth, apparently. National allegiances, they're just pawns in the game. Oh, boy. Well, we all think that maybe we'll become rich enough so that we can do that, so we can't stop it. We, all of us, want at one point in our lives to become that powerful, and if it's not there, what's the point? Yes, exactly. What's the point? It is really odd. People really think, well, I can't change these rules and laws because, I might be able to become a rich person and step all over people, and I want to do that too. It looks like fun. Maybe we need to change the idea of what's fun, because I don't consider that fun. Once again, why is humanity, the embracing of humanity, being humane, why is that considered a weakness in some circles? Certain, shall we say, macho, misogynistic, Trump bro circles. They don't care about the babies. We're trying to make them feel bad about the babies at the border. They're not concentration camps, and even if they are, it's the parents' fault. You're just trying to make me feel bad about the babies, and I don't care about the babies. Those babies are going to grow up and become MS-13. All you have to do is look into their eyes. You could tell. And I got to tell you, I can tell, too, by just looking at, not just looking. How about looking, speaking, engaging with many of these people? And, boy, talk about grievance. In my re-education camps, which will comprise of every single icebox baby gulag concentration camp in a private enterprise strip mall, we can't allow U.S. lawmakers to enter the premises of this concentration camp because this is private enterprise. You don't have oversight over us. They've been contracted out. Constitutional guarantees don't apply in business. Have you ever heard of a democracy in business? Well, I have, but not very many, so they do have a point. And when the right wing always said they wanted to run government like a business, they meant like a dictatorship, and here we are. Here we are. Apparently, all those incarcerated kids in the strip mall concentration camps can leave anytime they want. But U.S. lawmakers can't inspect at all, ever. Topsy-turvy world. It's a topsy-turvy world. Well, what's on the rest of the menu here? In the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, by the way. And, of course, it's just a lovely velvety hollandaise sauce, really, on a quite equally lovely egg dish. What do you think it is? Punching Nazis? Maybe. Well, of course, at the top, that was Rachel breaking down Planned Parenthood's calls for the Missouri Health Director, Randall Williams, to resign. And, well, he should. I don't know. He's an OBGYN. What's his nickname? What's his handle online? Joseph Mengele? The mind reels. On the rest of the menu, Trump's new press secretary is a repeat federal lawbreaker, so she's the perfect choice to defend his sexist attacks. The Florida GOP is about to make it much harder for people to vote again. It's a growth industry in Florida to keep people from voting. It truly is. And tired of Republican voter suppression? Elizabeth Warren has a plan for that. After the break, we then move to the chef's table, where Denmark becomes the third Nordic country to form a leftist government this year. And as the universe always seeks balance in a vacuum, Fascist-era street names will return to Cordoba, Spain, as the city's neo-Franco rightist government takes over. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice the chat room link, and that is monitored diligently by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. If you would then look to the leftish of the page from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage, which just happens to be at netrootsradio.com, you will then notice the link to our Patreon site, and do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. We've been doing this for 8 years, and we really have been unable to do it without you, because you are truly our biggest contributor. What we pull it out of our own wallets really does make this thing go, but it doesn't go as far or even all the way without your help, and we are truly thankful for your generosity over all these 8 years, and we're looking forward to another 8 years or more. Wow, we'll see. Okay, so if you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. How easy is that? And that's run by Tom, and Tom, thank you. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam, and I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that link out on social media in what we call the scramble period. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Breaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever fine podcasts can be found. Mixed in with every single other podcast in the world. We're in the W's. I think you can skip all the way down. Some people have to scroll. They do. Programming note, it being Wednesday, giving a heads up, I am going over the weekend to my son's celebration of life in Salem, Oregon, and that will occur on Sunday. And I anticipate coming back from Salem back here to Southern Oregon, Sunday evening or so, and I anticipate having a show on Monday. But right now it could be up for speculation on whether that is the case, because you never know what travel is going to be like. But regardless, over the weekend, we'll have as much regular programming as I'm able to gather before I do leave and drive to the celebration of life for my son. I have to say I have some ambivalent feelings about it. It's very nice. His friends really took the proverbial bull by the horns and put this together. And could be several hundred people at least showing up, so we're looking forward to that. I'll be giving a speech because that's what, dads should do in those situations. But it's hard celebrating the life of your late adult son when you really just want to celebrate life with him. And I know I am in some metaphysical way, but I got to tell you it's different, okay? It's a memory. I would prefer, the present physical presence of my son rather than just the fleeting and, sadly, this is the way that life is, diminishing memory. It sucks. Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to bring you down on Wednesday, but here we are. So that is a programming note. David and his show will come off exactly as usual, and we'll be up afterwards, we anticipate. And if I'm not actually doing a show, we'll have something appropriate in its place. I'll be here. I just might not be able to put a show together. All right. That stated, let's get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. You do know we're a salon. So, we have some topics, and who knows where the conversation's going to go. After we've had a couple of French 77s, I know that's the featured special on Fridays, but it's available all week. Come on. What do you think this is? Just a cookbook store? Supposedly, no. You push that panel over there and you get into the speakeasy. There you go. Oliver Willis from Share Blue Media brings us this offering in the Bistro Cafe. Well, Stephanie Grisham has defended the worst of Trump. Now she's been promoted to be his White House press secretary. And I'll go to the link that I provide on the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's. I know that you cannot, if you're intellectually honest, you can't tie a person's personality to the fraction of a second it takes to take a picture of that person. You're freezing a really small, tiny segment of time for all time, supposedly. And so you cannot determine a person's, personality, etc., just by the fraction of a second it took to freeze a fraction of a second to have that picture. But I don't know. I don't think every photographer is that good to catch the Trump team with their crazy Michelle Bachmann eyes. Almost all of them have these crazy Michelle Bachmann eyes. Oh, my God. Okay, there's got to be like a terrible, I don't know, science fiction screenplay being written as I speak about Eyes of Michelle Bachmann. And searing, very, very searing. But frightening, too, because you don't know if you're in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre butcher shop or you're just in, like, a very nice chocolate. You never know. Well, Stephanie Grisham is known for breaking federal law and defending Trump's sexist attacks. And so she was announced as his new White House press secretary since Sarah Smokia Huckabee is going back to, what is it, Georgia? She wants to be governor of the whatever state that they allow her brother to abuse dogs in. Well, last year, the U.S. Office of Special Counsel determined that Grisham broke federal law, violating the Hatch Act. The Hatch Act. They don't care about the Hatch Act. That's some sort of quaint thing that democracy had. There's no democracy in a business. The Hatch Act, that prevents business. There's nothing more important than business. Everything is measured by business. Hatch Act? Another government regulation impeding the progress of business. Well, the OSC has concluded that Ms. Grisham's tweet about Trump campaign slogan with the MAGA hashtag did violate the Hatch Act, the Office of Special Counsel determined, and issued a warning to Grisham for breaking the law. Jesus. Really? A stern letter? They don't care about democracy. They only care about business. It's not personal, though it is. It's not personal. It's business. Emily Singer of Share Blue Media brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Well, Florida voters recently passed a measure with overwhelming turnout to allow felons to regain their voting rights. Felons who have been released, and in many cases on trumped-up charges. Let's not forget that. Okay, maybe by design. So, by overwhelming numbers, Floridians passed a measure restoring voting rights to felons. Well, Republicans can't have that. I mean, we're talking about a party who doesn't want Democratic voters to become part of the political process. And if they had their way, nobody would be part of that except, whoever can skim off the top, steal from the till, and line their pockets. Anything that impedes that, like democracy. A representative democratic republic, they like to say. Why don't we just call it a democracy? Because that's what it is. That is always in the way. Indeed. So DeSantis, the governor there, is about to sign a bill that would all but end early voting on college campuses. This is similar to what they being the GOP right-wing, anti-government, anti-Americans, anti-America side does and had done with the abortion debate, the women's health issues. That in women's health clinics there would have to be some ridiculous regulation like having a janitor closet every 11 feet, some stupid thing. they'd have to have a particular kind of fluorescent light. If they had another kind, that, they'd get shut down. Just, you know what I mean. So DeSantis now has determined that if there's not enough parking spaces on a college campus, and they have to be open. Now, of course, on a college campus, parking spaces are assigned and often paid for by the student. And those are for the ones that have cars. But if there's not enough open parking spaces for just like the public to come, you can't have a polling place on campus. So those students that have cars can drive to the polling place. But how many students who don't have cars who live on campus are unable to get to the voting and polling place and vote? So early voting is being struck down. And they hate government regulations when it impedes the business of lining their own pockets. But government regulation that promotes representation and civic involvement in a democracy. What's the old saw again? There's no democracy in business. Millhiser of Think Progress brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Well, Warren has a brilliant plan to neutralize Republican voter suppression. She has a plan for everything, and I like it. So I just want to say, by and large, we have one hell of a field of presidential candidates, and some stellar ones indeed. Even more stellar than the whole group. So Elizabeth Warren should have some place in whatever administration. If it happens to be hers, well, then she'll be at the top. But whatever and whomever becomes the leader of the Democratic Party and runs and wins for president, I would think that possibly every single one running for president should have a place in that administration. And maybe we could try to get some senators. It would be nice if there were some presidential candidates right now running for senator. I know it's probably tough, but still, the Senate is where we need to put some life back into our democracy, because right now it's a place where everything goes to die, Mitch. Well, Senate and presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren released a plan to strengthen our democracy yesterday, Tuesday. Her plan tracks for the People Act of 2019, the legislation commonly referred to as H.R. 1, which House Democrats passed last March, and of course, Mitch McConnell killed because he's the Grim Reaper. Well, it's what sets Warren's plan apart is the sophisticated mechanisms she uses to insulate voting reforms from state officials' hostility to voting rights. Warren's plan is not a perfect solution to the problem of anti-democratic state officials, and like nearly all laws, it is defenseless against a rogue Supreme Court that is determined to give an electoral advantage to Republicans because almost everything is not enough. They have to have everything. Nevertheless, it's a thoughtful effort at least to mitigate red states' ability to sabotage pro-democratic reforms. The Warren Plan includes many of the reforms included in H.R. 1, a bill which represents the consensus among congressional Democrats and voting rights groups. Like H.R. 1, Warren pushes for enhanced election security, automatic voter registration, early voting at least 15 days before the election, and independent redistricting commissions to thwart gerrymandering, among other things. I believe she's also looking for paper ballots. How about not having proprietary software in voting machines? How about that? How about we have paper ballots? Yet, what makes Warren's plan interesting is the safeguards she layers into H.R. 1 in order to work around a constitutional quirk that limits Congress' power to regulate elections. The Constitution permits states to determine, quote, the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives. But it also permits Congress to, at any time, and this is a quote, by law make or alter such regulations except as to the places of choosing senators. Thus, for congressional elections, Congress has virtually unlimited power to tell states how to run elections, so long as Congress does not violate some other provision of the Constitution. For state elections, however, things are a bit trickier. Some provisions of the Constitution, like the 15th Amendment, permit Congress to enact laws that prevent certain kinds of voting discrimination, but the Supreme Court's Republican majority reads the 15th Amendment so narrowly that lawmakers cannot be confident that the majority would uphold significant reforms regulating state elections directly. That potentially creates a problem for election reformers. Though Congress can order the states to comply with certain voting rights protections in congressional elections, the state could conceivably impose stricter requirements to vote in state-level races. H.R. 1, it is worth noting, only applies many of its reforms to federal elections. Warren seeks to get around this problem in two ways. The first is that while the Constitution may not give Congress sweeping power to regulate state elections, it does permit the federal government to offer conditional grants to states. That is, Congress can offer the states a chunk of money, but only if the states comply with a new set of election rules. See? Business. And sometimes money doesn't talk, it swears. And then after it's sworn a couple of times, it gets right back to talking. So Warren's plan will pay the entirety of a state's election administration costs as long as the state meets federal standards in its state and local elections and works to make voting more convenient. Now, states can refuse to take this money, but cold, hard cash is a strong incentive for them to play ball. Moreover, states that achieve high percentage voter turnout, including across racial, gender, and age groups, will be awarded additional bonus payments. I might conjecture that this is somewhat of the proverbial Khrushchev rope. Oh, you don't remember about Khrushchev's rope? And his disrespect of the capitalist. Now, really, what these Republican majorities in many of these state houses might do because of their abject greed that they cannot escape. It is so part of their nature, they cannot escape it. Cold, hard cash, which may result in them being voted out of office if more people are voting. But money just might be the incentive. As Khrushchev said, that when he came to stomp across America, you can rest assured that he'd sell, or that the capitalists would sell him the rope that he'd use to hang him with. I know that's a brutal sort of comparison, but the capitalist is willing to sell the rope for a bit of cold, hard cash. Well, that brings us to our break, and when we get back from that break, you know that we are going to go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, new category of movie, the Zomcom. Early on in The Dead Don't Die, we're informed that the story will end badly. Indeed, those very words are spoken by police officer Ronnie Peterson, played with deadpan panache by Adam Driver to Chief Cliff Robertson, and equally deadpan Bill Murray. In fitting Jim Jarmusch fashion, the fourth wall is broken early on, letting us all know that the main characters are aware they're actually in a movie. Set in the fictional Pennsylvania town of Centerville, taken from Frank Zappa's 200 Motels, the comedy/satire focuses on local law enforcement officials played by the aforementioned Driver, Murray, and Chloe Sevigny, who join forces with other locals to battle the undead. The plot launcher here is polar fracking, which changes the Earth's rotation, causing the sun to shine at night and, of course, the dead to rise. In addition to the trio of cops, there's a strange Irish funeral home owner named Zelda, played by a swaggering Tilda Swinton, who's somehow an expert at taking out zombies, but alas, can't stay long enough to save the town. Without spoilers, Zelda's exit in the hands of any other director would be downright absurd, but Jarmusch manages to make it work. While the movie is a spoof on the zombie genre, it's also a satire about the addictions of modern life, with a splash of Trump-era commentary. The undead hilariously mutter about the things they coveted in life, ranging from coffee and Chardonnay to cars and trucks to Wi-Fi. A local homeless hermit and narrator, played by Tom Waits, wraps the picture with a wonderful pointed soliloquy to this effect. The Dead Don't Die is as funny and witty a movie as it is star-studded, and succeeds because it doesn't take itself too seriously. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Karen Hopkin. The microbes in our intestines help keep us healthy, strengthening our immune systems and promoting metabolism. But they may also give us a leg up when it comes to moving our legs up and down again, rapidly and repeatedly. Because a new study finds that mice that are fed bacteria isolated from elite athletes log more time on the treadmill than other mice that are treated only to bacteria found in yogurt. The results appear in the journal Nature Medicine. Alexander Kostic, a microbiologist at Harvard Medical School, was initially interested in how the gut microbes of people with diabetes might differ from folks without the condition. The idea being that tweaking the microbiome might help to treat the disease. But the question of enhancing overall health and fitness can also come from the other direction.
But here the question was more, what's unique in the microbiome of someone who is supremely healthy? And can we use that feature of the microbiome to transfer into other people to potentially make them healthier?
And a handy window into the gut is poop. So Kostic and his crew asked 15 runners who completed the Boston Marathon in 2015 to provide daily stool samples from a week before the race to a week after. They also collected samples from 10 people who were decidedly more sedentary, and they tallied the bacteria present in each.
And when we looked at this data, there was one thing that really jumped out at us, and it was this genus of bacteria that isn't so well studied, Veillonella. We found that it was very significantly higher in abundance in the gut after the marathon. But not only that, it was found much more frequently in elite marathon runners than in the general population.
To see whether this microbe might provide the athletes with any benefit, they gave some to mice and then let the little rodents run. And they found that the mice loaded with Vianella spent more time on the treadmill than those that got lactobacillus.
And this was an increase of 13%. I think any endurance athlete or any athlete in general will tell you that 13% increase is pretty significant.
Now, the interesting thing about Vianella is that they thrive on lactate, which is a chemical produced by fatigued muscle. The bacteria consume lactate and convert it into a fatty acid called propionate. Then mice that were treated to propionate, which was delivered via teeny tiny enemas to mimic its release by gut bacteria, similarly extended their treadmill time.
And so this creates this kind of a positive feedback loop, and it helps us to understand why Vianella might be enriched in elite athletes in the first place.
Exercise produces lactate, which feeds Vianella. Vianella produces propionate, which somehow promotes endurance, at least in treadmill trotting mice, which means that gut microbes may hold the secret to extending that workout without getting pooped. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Karen Hopkin.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
If you leave a child in a car on a hot day with the windows rolled up, I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. You've created a situation that could be lethal and certainly poses a serious risk of injury, which, as David Fauci, the director of the ACLU's National Prison Project, points out, is exactly what we're doing to prisoners across the United States, particularly in the South, with temperatures far in excess of 100 degrees and with prisons that are usually built out of heat-retaining materials. These prisons put at serious risk inmates who are taking psychotropic drugs or meds for high blood pressure or who have asthma or who are 55 or older. As a recent report on the stultifying summer heat in prisons recently released by the East Hampton, Massachusetts-based Prison Policy Initiative says, quote, courts in Wisconsin, Arizona, and Mississippi have ruled that incarceration in extreme hot or cold temperatures violates the Eighth Amendment prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment. But these court cases have not had a national impact on air conditioning in prisons, and many prisons, even those recently built, intentionally have none. With the result that incarcerated people are being subjected to conditions that violate basic human rights, with we on the outside being responsible for closing any windows and letting medically vulnerable human beings bake. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1894. That was the day the American Railway Union, led by Eugene V. Debs, voted to support the boycott of Chicago's Pullman Palace cars. The nation was gripped by an economic depression. The Pullman workers were on strike because the company had severely slashed their wages. But Pullman had not reduced the workers' rent payments in his company town. When the American Railway Union held its convention in Chicago that June, the Pullman workers attended. They were determined to win the union's support. One of the Pullman workers who spoke during the union's convention was a young woman named Jenny Curtis. Jenny was a seamstress at Pullman. Her father had also worked for the company for 13 years. He had grown ill and could not work during the final months of his life. He died owing $60 in back rent to the company. Jenny had to pay off his back rent along with her own board. Then, wages were slashed. Jenny became the leader of the ladies' union at Pullman Local 209. She addressed the railroad union meeting with passion and emotion, saying, "We struck at Mr. Pullman because we were without hope. We joined the American Railway Union because it gave us a glimmer of hope." 20,000 souls, men, women, and little ones, have their eyes turned toward this convention today. And thus, the merry war, the dance of skeletons bathed in human tears, goes on. And it will go on, brothers, forever, unless you, the American Railway Union, stop it, end it, crush it out. And so I say, come along with us for decent conditions everywhere. The American Railway Union voted to support the boycott, but the effort was brutally crushed by federal troops, resulting in the deaths of 24 workers. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 52 degrees Fahrenheit. Oh, yes, a little chillier. We're going to be a little cooler today as well. Slated from the low to mid-70s. It should be more in the mid-70s here. Though in the days ahead, it looks like we're going to dip down into the 60s with overnight lows in the upper 40s, low 50s. Now, listen, I don't want my tomatoes harmed. Stop it. Though if we're in the mid-70s, that's quite fine. Possibility of a stray thunderstorm and shower throughout the day and night. Winds are light and variable out of the northwest, and will shift in a couple of hours out of the west-southwest and pick up to 10 to 15 miles per hour. So that's going to be pretty brisk. And winds will then shift out of the west-northwest later on this evening, diminishing to only 5 to 10 miles per hour overnight. And it looks like we'll continue with those winds at 5 to 10 miles per hour tomorrow, but out of the west. Grass pollen is still rated at high. The air quality index is at 10, so that's come down a bit. That's 10 parts per million, by the way. And that's come down a little bit. And the daytime UV index remains very high at 9. And wherever you are, if you have anything above 7, well, I would say above 2, but anything above 7, take extra care. Extra. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 29.67 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 70%. Well, we just might have a confluence of hot and cold with electrical activity, hopefully not starting forest fires. And if anything were to happen, I hope there's plenty of rain to put them out. But we want rain, and we would like to have rain on our gardens. So think positively. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you think positively, but it's always nice to anyway. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Producers, that is my pea tape. And the popping of peas sometimes can be endearing, if not done terribly. London is 72 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 94 and sunny with a heat advisory. Get out. Get out of Paris. Everybody does, except they usually wait until August when it gets to be this weather. August. It's only the end of June. People don't take their month-long vacations at the end of June. They're still working hard. So I guess they're not leaving to get out to the Normandy coast. Or the Brittany coast. I would say the Brittany coast is even much more beautiful if you want to know. Well, a reporter's opinion that happens to be this one's. All right, let's continue. Rome is 93 and fair with a heat advisory as well. Kiev is 88 and fair. Kabul is 81 and fair. Hong Kong is 84 and partly cloudy. It's warm. Tokyo is 78 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia, fortunately, is in their winter, or the beginning of it at least, and they are 55 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California, is 57 degrees and sunny. And New York is 82 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Jacob Gronholt Pedersen and Andreas Mortensen from Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Dateline Copenhagen. Denmark will become the third Nordic country this year to form a leftist government after social democratic leader Mette Frederiksen agreed to terms for a one-party minority government late on Wednesday, which was earlier today, Pacific time. With the new left-leaning government unlikely to fundamentally change Danish economic policy, Frederiksen, who at 41 becomes Denmark's youngest prime minister, has promised to increase welfare spending after years of austerity. However, financing plans remain blurry after Frederiksen, together with three leftist parties, presented an 18-page paper entitled Fair Direction for Denmark that outlines the government's ambitions, which include a 70% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. Obviously, Denmark doesn't realize that it's a Chinese hoax. Ask Donnie, he knows everything. Well, this is the third Nordic government country to embrace more left-leaning issues. And, well, let's be clear, austerity only hurts. It never helps.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Dateline Madrid. Fascist-era street names will be returned to Cordoba. The Spanish city's new rightist administration decided at its first meeting overturning the left's move to change them. The Conservative People's Party, which now governs in Cordoba, along with the center-right Ciudadanos, said it wanted to recover popular street names changed last year under the city's previous administration. More than 4 decades after his death, General Francisco Franco, hi, I'm still dead, his legacy remains a source of deep divisions in Spanish society since, he was a Nazi fascist in his own, making. And, he was the leader of Spain when Nixon was running around. In fact, Nixon dressed up his security forces there, his security detail at the White House in Franco-style uniforms. It was quite lovely. Well, that does bring us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. We're going to meet up tomorrow for Metro's Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.